What do you do when your world as you know it ends? What do you do when life deals you what you are almost certain to be the knockout blow or the knockout punch? We are exploring all of this and more today on the show, and I cannot wait to get started. If we have not met, my name is Kristi Lowe, and I am the host of the Even If podcast, and I want to welcome you today to the show. If you have been hanging around for a while, we bring these stories of our even if moments, what God did when we were at our lowest or our worst or the darkest. And I'll just tell y'all that I have a sweetest guest today. It is a heck of a story, and I am thrilled for you to meet my friend Dawn Sanders. Dawn is the associate minister at First Baptist Church of Glenarden in Maryland, where she serves as the director of the sermon-based life groups ministry. She has written and she has taught extensively on overcoming adversity and creating a new life, both at her home church, on her blog, and in an upcoming book that we are going to talk about here in just a minute. But before we get all into that, I want to welcome you to the show. Dawn, welcome.
Thank you, Kristi. I am so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
No, the pleasure honestly is mine. But for my friends who maybe don't know you or haven't met you yet, why don't you just tell everybody just a little bit about yourself?
Okay, you shared some of the some of my resume, so I'll share some things that are a little more personal. I met and married the love of my life late in life. We met
Oh,
at 40 and we got married and started having a family. I should say started having a family, started trying to have a family and doing ministry together. And a year into our marriage, when we were trying to have a family, we had two miscarriages consecutively. Um, and then 6 months after the second miscarriage, my husband passed away. He went out jogging at lunchtime and had a catastrophic heart attack. The doctors believe that he was gone before he hit the ground. And so, in the span of 8 months, I lost my family, my dreams for the future, as far as a family went, because meeting my husband late in life, the chances of me meeting someone else and getting married and then having a family with them basically evaporated as far as I was concerned. I know God can do it, but that's how I felt, was that it was over.
wow. Sweet friend, that's a lot. That's a lot to go through. Um, there are not a lot of words whenever you bump up into, let me rephrase it to say it this way. There are no easy answers or platitudes. There are, that I think you've probably heard the song Words Fail, that words fail and words do not reach whenever something like this happens. And you end up, if I were guessing based on some of the things I've lived through too, you look around and you go, why? What in the world? How am I going to how am I going to keep going? And you talk about you've written a book called When Your World Ends. And when I first read the title of that book, I thought nobody titles a book When Your World Ends if they have not lived through an unexpected turn in life and lived through it. But you talk about in your book that there came a point where you just confess you did not want to go on living.
Yeah.
Yeah, can you talk about that?
Yeah, that point came fairly quickly behind my husband's death. Like the
Really?
next, yeah, not the next day, the second day. The next day, I really woke up with an intense desire to have a very um, honest conversation with God because I didn't understand what was happening. My husband and I were both saved. We were both active in our church and trying to have a family. And we thought, even with those two miscarriages, which boggled our minds as well, the first miscarriage we understood, right? Miscarriages
Yeah.
happen. We didn't consider
Yeah.
ourselves special. But then when the second one hit, we were like, okay, what's happening? What's going
What's
on? This is just, it just doesn't make sense. And so I just wanted to have this honest conversation with God. But then that next morning, when the conversation was over, I
was
woke
this
up
an
and I was like,
angry, hang on just a second, was this an angry conversation? Was this when you were
yeah,
struggling, when you were like, I don't know if I want to go on living. Like
You
I'm
know,
ready to be with Jesus. I want to be with my husband, which totally understandable. If my husband died, I would be like, take me home. I'm good. So where was your heart in that space?
the first conversation, it was really just confused. I wasn't
Sure.
yet angry. I was just, I do not understand what is going on. And the
Hmm.
only person who can really explain it to me at this point in time is God, right?
Yeah.
And so I expected it to have what I call an ugly prayer, meaning
Yes.
that I was going to cry and I was going to look the ugliest could imagine myself looking because, and that's what I mean by an honest conversation with God, because all of those emotions I was going to give to him and did give to him. When it was time to have the conversation, though, I really only had two words for him. What now? What now,
Mm.
God? I'm lost. I knew what to
Yeah.
do yesterday and I was doing it. I was walking in what I felt was my purpose and all of that. And today I am like totally confused. I have no idea who I am. And God told me, you honored your husband in life. Now honor him in death. And I thought to
Mm.
myself, I can do that. I know how to honor my husband. I've been, like I just said, I have been
Yeah.
doing that. But the next morning when I woke up, I didn't want to.
You didn't want to do what?
I didn't want to go on. It's not that and I'm glad you clarified that. It's not that I didn't want to honor my husband. I didn't
Hmm.
want to live without him.
No.
And
Yeah.
it hit me that morning differently than the morning before, because I was prepared that first morning to have a conversation. It's like I knew I needed to talk to God. The second morning, it was like I don't so much need in the sense of looking for answers,
Hmm.
right? But every morning, the way we had developed a routine in our marriage, my husband got up first. He spent his time with God. He woke me up. We prayed together. Then he left to go to work. And I spent my time with God. And so, with my husband gone, he was no longer here to wake me up. So, that second morning where I didn't have all these questions, right?
Yeah.
I woke up that morning on my own without my husband waking me up. And I just hurt. I just
Oh, yeah.
missed him so much in that moment. And like you just said, I didn't want to go on. And so it hit me, it occurred to me that when God made the decision to take my husband, he also made another decision, which was to leave me here.
Mm.
And I couldn't ask God to bring my husband back because my husband's in heaven. He's
He's
paradise.
good.
He's
Yeah.
good. I'm the one in
Yes.
this still living here
Huh.
with all the challenges and the suffering and everything that goes on in the world we live in today. And so instead of asking God to return my husband, I asked him to take me too.
Yeah.
And so for the next several nights, I went to sleep hoping and praying, begging God to take me too. And eventually I kept waking up and eventually I came to understand that by waking me up each morning, because we didn't have another conversation right then,
Hmm.
right? That's the other thing. It's like I
Yeah.
would go to sleep praying
Yep.
he would take me. I would wake up, he hadn't taken me. And it was like, I don't need to ask what now. He's told me, he is giving me my marching orders. And I did try to walk in that to the best of my ability during that season. But I preferred to honor my husband with him there. You know how they say give them their
Yeah.
flowers
Oh,
while they're there? I wanted to
yeah.
honor my husband in his presence. I didn't want to honor him without him. And yeah, if I'd had my
Yeah.
druthers, I'd have gone on to glory.
Oh, I wouldn't. I'm with you 100%. You talk about how you compared it to Jonah and Nineveh. And okay, there's a part about that story that totally wrecked me. If you don't talk about it, I'm gonna bring it up. But you probably know what I'm talking about. But when you talk about how you found yourself relating to Jonah, like, I don't want to go there. I do not want to go to Nineveh. You did not want to do life and keep going forward. without him. And I so get that. So get that. Can you share a little bit about your analogy of you and Jonah and that?
Sure. In Jonah 1, the story starts out with God telling Jonah to go to Nineveh. And instead of going to Nineveh, Jonah flees to Tarsus. He actually gets on a ship bound for Tarsus, right?
Mhm.
And for those of you who aren't aware, he gets on the ship in Joppa, which is in today's Israel, and Tarsus is in today's Spain. So he was trying to get as far away to the like basically the other side of the
Yeah.
sea
He
from
was like,
the
deuces, I'm
direction
gone. Yeah.
exactly from the direction God was trying to take him in.
Hmm.
And God sent a storm, right? And so the mariners on the ship, they're like losing it because this storm is threatening to tear the ship apart. Jonah, on the other hand, was fine with it because he was like, I prefer this to
Yeah.
going to Nineveh.
Yeah.
And eventually the mariners ask him, why is he not praying and what's going on and all of these things? And Jonah says, it's my fault, right? God is dealing with me. And he said, the way to solve the problem is toss me into the sea, throw me overboard.
Yeah.
And as I was meditating on that passage, it occurred to me that Jonah wasn't so much wanting to end his life because I fully think that Jonah expected that when they threw him in the ocean, the sea, the Mediterranean Sea, that he
Hmm.
was going to die. They had been out at least a day, so they were in deep water, right? And
Hmm.
so Jonah fully expected to drown, but God had other plans. God sent a great fish to swallow Jonah. And
Hmm.
instead of drowning, Jonah spent 3 days in the belly of that fish. And some scholars believe that spending 3 days in the belly of a fish would have taken the stomach acid of that fish, would have eaten away the outer
Hmm.
layer of skin that
That
Jonah
so
had.
totally grossed me out. I had never thought about that
Yep.
ever. So when
Hmm.
I read that, I was like, oh my gosh, she's so totally right. How jacked up was he by the time he got to the shore?
So, yeah, so he wasn't just sitting in the belly of this fish without more challenges and
Yeah.
suffering befalling him. He's sitting there basically being digested by the
Yeah.
fish. And
Mhm.
so, after deciding, okay, I've had enough of this because this was 3 days. So, obviously, this is a
Yeah.
slow process. He's still, in many ways, intact. It's just the outer layer of his skin that
Just
they
a
thought
flesh
might have been
wound.
eaten away, right? And
Yeah.
so he finally prays,
Hmm.
right? And asks
Yes.
God to save him. And so God has the fish spit him up on dry land, right? Closer to where he started out so that he could go
Yes.
to Nineveh. And so again, as I was meditating on that, I was like, my life is bad enough without my husband. I don't
Yeah.
need any other issues going on in my life. And the real power of life and death from that story says to us it's not in our hands. We can try to take life into our hands. That's the expression, right? We can try to take life into our hands, but
Yeah.
ultimately, right, whether or not we our lives begin or end, because God opens the womb too. So it's not just the end of our
Yes.
life, but the beginning of life and the end of life is a decision God makes. And so I said to myself, my life is jacked up enough.
Yeah.
I don't need any other challenges. I could try to kill myself like Jonah,
Yeah.
basically, right?
Yeah.
But it not work. And what I also saw was that Jonah, he didn't really, in my opinion, want to die. He just didn't want to go to Nineveh. And
Yeah.
given the choice between life and
Hmm.
Nineveh
And obedience. Yeah.
and death,
Hmm.
Jonah was like me saying, God, if you give me the choice,
I'm out.
we're choosing to go on to glory.
Yeah.
But
Absolutely.
for neither one of us, for Jonah nor me, did God give us that option.
And sometimes we just don't understand why we've been asked to walk that kind of a path. I can imagine you looking around and going, I've had two miscarriages. I thought I was going to have a family. I've I have lost the love of my life and I cannot bring him back. Why? Why? And yet he met you with this story I love one of the most tender parts of God is how he meets us wherever we are when it is nasty, when it is dirty and it is ugly. And he still says, I'm still here. I am not leaving you. I'm with you. And he showed you that through Jonah and Nineveh, and then ultimately in our Savior, in Jesus. There was a part where you wrote, I've got to be honest, you may be a first time author. You do not write like a first time author, just for the record. Your writing is beautiful because later on you were talking about Jesus and when he did not want to walk through this suffering, just like Jonah didn't want to, just like we don't want to, all of the ways that we try to avoid it. And you wrote, Jesus had the power to alter his circumstances, yet the Prince of Peace chose to pray. Girl,
Yeah.
that is a word.
Thank you. And
You're
he
welcome.
did. The scripture says that he was so tormented by the choice put before him that he
Mm-hmm.
was sweating drops of blood.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't want to
Mm-hmm.
go
I would
through
have been
that.
too.
Oh,
And he knew what he was getting himself into. We don't even know everything we're really getting ourselves into. He knew what was fixing to happen.
yes, the
I've been
crucifixion,
bleeding
the
too.
torturing, and the
Yes.
pain that was going to come with that,
Yeah.
right? But when he was presented with a decision between his will
Mm-hmm.
and God's will, he
Mm-hmm.
yielded his will. He was
Yeah.
obedient to God and went to the cross for us. Yeah. So when I was going through my journey, right, I thought about Jonah and I was like, hey, I would like to run too. I really would like to run, right? But
Understandable. Yeah.
what good is that going to do, right?
It's
Jonah just
not.
showed me run is not going to work.
Nope.
And I could wind up in a worse situation. That was the other thing, because Jonah went into the belly of
Yes.
the well, or I'm sorry, the fish
The fish.
whole,
Yeah.
right? But like I said, many scholars think that he came out damaged physically.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
like, I could do myself real harm, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And wind up in,
This is a word right here.
okay,
Yes.
and wind up
Yes.
in a worse situation than I'm in right now. Yes, being without my husband is the most painful thing
Yes.
I have had to walk through, but we could have added injury to physical injury to emotional injury.
Mm.
And I wasn't willing to do that. I was like, okay, God, because God has a way, like I told you about my journey of showing me
Mm-hmm.
he's in control. And it was like, yeah, you don't need to tell me that you're in control of whether or not I'm going to be here or not. So yeah.
So I did a series this past spring on being
Hmm.
control freaks because like such a control freak. Like I joked in that series, I was like, I wanted to believe that I was a recovering control freak. Turns out I'm just a control freak, as it turns out. Yeah. I think control, when we think this illusion of control, we think we have some semblance of power of what's going to happen or how it's going to unfold. And if we live in that fighting and that's a fighting and a battle with the Lord, that even though it's okay to wrestle, is absolutely okay to wrestle with the Lord in your anguish and in your pain. Please don't hear me say that you can't do that, but we're never going to pull that control. We can, and he'll let us have our way, but like you said, we're not going to be better for it. It's just not going to go well. There came a point where you realized that your world had ended, but the world had not ended. Where were you in that, and how did you come to that realization? Do you remember?
Yeah, I do very
Okay.
vividly. As a matter of fact,
All
I
right, share.
yeah. It was one morning again. God, I'm one of those people who meets God in the morning, right? And I remember waking up one morning and being sick and tired of feeling sick and tired
Mm,
and just going, it's it just became extremely apparent, basically obvious, that God was not gonna take me, at least not anytime soon. And I can now say, no, it's been 13 years. So, yeah, not anytime soon was God planning on taking me.
Yeah.
And after a few months, I just was like, this is getting me nowhere.
Yeah.
And so I'm not going to put my energy there anymore. I wonder, as I'm saying this to you now, I've never thought about this before, but it just entered my mind. That might have been where David was after he finished fasting, because he was like, the baby's gone. And for
Mm.
those of you who don't know the story, David had an affair with Bathsheba, and
Yeah.
then he later killed Bathsheba's husband. And that's why I say an affair,
Yes.
because she was married to another man. And they get together, and I should say get together. Part of the reason he killed another man is because she became pregnant
Hmm.
with his baby, and there was no way of getting around it.
Yep.
It was going to come out, and so he killed her husband and married her, and then she lost the baby.
Yeah.
And when and when I say she lost the baby, I believe the baby was born, and then a few days, and he was like praying that the baby would be okay, and then the baby died. And
Mhm.
after the baby died, he washed his face, got up, and he got dressed. And his servants were like, wait a minute, you were just renting your clothes and tearing yourself up,
Yeah.
fasting, right? Having those ugly prayers I was just talking about. And now you just washed your face and you're just walking around like you're fine, like you're so over it. And he was, yeah. It's
Yeah.
like God has answered, right? And I've accepted the answer, and I'm moving forward. And so that was me going, okay, God, you have answered, and I'm accepting the answer. I petitioned you, right, as much as I
Yeah.
could,
I begged
right?
you. Yeah.
And you're saying no. So yeah, I'm now saying this, I need to put my energies, because I'm going to be here, because I'm accepting it, going, okay, God, I'm going to be here. And since I'm going to be here, I'm somehow or another, I'm going to have to find a way to enjoy my time here, because I cannot spend the rest of my life suffering. I'm a saved child of God. That is not, I was trying to go to glory. I wasn't trying to spend the rest of my life suffering. So
Yeah.
I said, no, I'm
Yeah.
going to try my doggonedest to embrace the good that is
Mm.
here.
Yeah. You said moving forward, and I think that's such a powerful way to shift it. I think we'll hear the people in the world will say that you have to move on, and I firmly believe you don't ever move on, because there will always be a piece of you that is still there, but you find a way to
Mm-hmm.
move forward. You find a way to find the next step in the next season. And you've said several times that you would meet him in the morning, and that the passage, his mercies are new every morning, just keeps coming to mind, because every morning that he gives us is another day that he's allowed us to be here. And I think we can check out. There are people who, when this happens, when life deals them this blow, they can just stop. I know people who have chosen to just, they've stopped. They've stopped living. They have made the decision that they're not going to keep going, and their life did end. And yet there was the invitation, like you talk about, there's an invitation that the Lord gives us to keep living. And that does not dishonor your husband. That doesn't dishonor those babies that are in heaven with him. That does not dishonor that memory of him at all. But it's a choice that we have to make. I know without a shadow of a doubt, because I know a lot of my listener family and I know some of their particular struggles. So I know that somebody today is listening, and they are certain that, let me rephrase that. They are listening, and they see you here standing on the other side of this painful season. And I want you to know that this is an encouragement to so many people. But there may be somebody who is wondering how they're going to make it through their season. And if you could tell that woman anything, what would you tell them?
Um, I have a chapter titled Create Space to Breathe and a
Mm,
Source of Water. And what it talks about in that chapter, when we say create space to breathe, it's a reference back to the Genesis story where God separates the waters above from the waters below. And when he separates them, he creates the atmosphere, and that's the air to breathe. And then he gathers the waters below, and that's the source of water. Water and the creation of the atmosphere and all of that is not just the creation of those physical elements, it's also the creation of weather.
Mhm.
And weather is also often representative of our emotions. And
Mm.
so when I'm talking about that, what I'm saying when I say create space to breathe, create space to deal with your emotions.
Mhm.
Because in the creation story, if I may, the story begins with the earth. In the NIV, it says, without form, void, and dark. And so in the beginning, it was without form, void, and dark. And as I was studying that passage, it was like, that's where I am right now. But what was so wonderful about that is that's verse 2. Verse 1 said, in the beginning. So that was in the beginning.
Mhm.
So this situation I find myself in, this formless, empty, and dark situation, for God is just the beginning. The next thing
Oh,
God
my.
does, actually, before I say the next thing, that's the situation we're in and the state of the earth. In that state, the verse ends with the Spirit of God was hovering. So the first thing God did in the creation story, and I say this in response to your question because we're creating new lives. And so
Oh.
in the creation story, God creates the first two lives, male and female, he creates them.
Mhm.
And he started that process in a formless, empty, and dark situation, but yet God was there hovering above all of it. And so if you find yourself in a holding pattern right now, it's because God is hovering, right? He hasn't moved forward, he's moving. And so rest assured, he's moving in this circular pattern. He's just not moving forward. And hovering as is often like when you think of like a bird, it comes across as like this peaceful movement. And I say peaceful, it's not that because like if you think like a hummingbird, they're really moving, right?
Sure.
But it still seems peaceful, it seems right.
Mhm.
They're they feel safe because if the bird didn't feel safe, it would fly off. And so it's in this safe place, hovering. We might not perceive that movement when we're there
Yes.
because we're focused on the formless, empty, and dark situation that we're in. But we don't have to
Yes.
fall into, we might, and I say fall because we might find ourselves on the edge or in the dark, but we don't have to fall into the abyss.
No.
We can rise above with God. And as I was about to say, the next thing God did was shine light. And so if we do rise above with God, we're in the position for God to shine his light into our lives. But God started in darkness. So don't rush to move out of the darkness, just rush to move to God
Yes.
because darkness is the same as light for God. He can see the same in darkness as he can in light. So even though you can't see, don't worry about the fact that you can't see. Worry about getting to God because he can see and he will chart your way out. And when you get to him, you put yourself in a position for him to shine his light into your life. Shining that light is him giving you a new vision for your
Yes.
life.
Yes.
When he gives you that new vision, I'm going to go back. I'm now circling back to the emotions.
Uh-huh.
If you're like me, and I hazard to say, Kristi, I feel safe saying that now,
Uh-huh. Yeah, can you see
you're
the
going to
tears in my eyes?
you're going to feel some kind of way about the vision God just gave you because it's
Yes.
not the same vision that you had when you entered the darkness. And so you might not necessarily be ready for this new vision. You might still be hanging on to the old vision. And that's where I was. I was torn between wanting to be with my husband, right?
Yes.
But feeling
Yes.
God's pull and
Mhm.
finally having to let go of the picture that I had of me and my husband together and embrace the new vision God had for my life. If I was going to keep up with God, because God had now, he now had a new vision. He was now moving in that new vision. And
Mhm.
so I had to deal with my emotions. I couldn't keep up with him at first because of my emotions. I had too much junk in the trunk in order to move
Yes.
forward, right? I had too much baggage,
Oh,
right,
yeah.
to move forward. So when you create space to breathe, you take time to deal with those emotions and
Mhm.
untangle them, right? Because God's separated. And so separate the things that are keeping you from moving forward and let them go. Then gather the emotions that are left. And as part of that gathering, right, I say gather the memories as
Mhm.
well as the emotions, because those memories, because if you're hanging on that tight to what happened before, it's because you became attached to that thing.
Yes.
And now you, like I said, you've been separated from
Yeah.
that
Well,
thing,
you created an idol out of something that isn't God. So, yes.
right? And so now you need to gather up those memories because God did something wonderful. We wouldn't have attached ourselves to that thing if it didn't, or that person, if that person or thing had not been good. All
Mm.
blessings, good things come from God. And so God had given us a good thing. We just weren't ready to let it go.
That's
And
right.
so we separate and we let it go, but then we gather those good
That's
things
right.
and those memories and those feelings, and we hold on to them as we move forward.
Thank you. That is such a powerful word. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can probably have seen the tears. If you're listening on the podcast, you know me, I'm a crier. And so I held it in check pretty well. But I got to tell you, sweet friend, that is an anointed word. And it is such a powerful word. And yeah, our prayer before we started would be that the Holy Spirit would go before us. And he showed up so big today. I know that there is no doubt in this world, given your chance, you'd probably still pick to have your husband back here with you. But I sure am grateful for the that you said yes, calling you to live out. It is beautiful. It is a beautiful testimony. Not only I think it's so honoring to your husband, and it is so honoring to the Lord, and both can be true. And you are so lovely, Dawn Sanders. Man, you are so lovely.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We're going to release this on on your book birthday. That's what, by the way, my for my listener family, when a book comes out, every the authors we call it your book birthday. And so today, the day this drops on September 17th, is your book birthday. So I'm going to just go ahead and proactively, even though it's July when we're recording this, I'm telling you happy book birthday, my friend. And if people would like to, we'll give them a link to where they can go purchase that book. But are you on Instagram? Do you want to, how can people connect with you if they want to find you?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and Threads and LinkedIn, and my handle is Dawn Mann Sanders. And Kristi, I'm sure we'll put that in the show notes for you.
I will connect with that. Uh,
I
I
also, if
thank
I
you.
may,
Yeah, go
oh,
ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. Go ahead.
I also, if I may, my website is also dawnmansanders.com.
Okay. Perfect. We'll get that. And we'll definitely put that in the show notes for our listener friends as well. And if you're new to podcasting, listen, your show notes is just wherever you're listening to the podcast, there's a place for notes in that app or wherever you're listening to it. So you can go in and scroll through and find all of those links in that place where you're listening. So iTunes, Spotify, wherever you're listening to it, that's where you'll find all of this stuff that we're talking about. Dawn, thank you for being here today. You are a gift. And I love that the Lord connected us.
Yes, me too. If I might, Kristi, your listeners do go out to my website. I just want them to know that there's a quiz that might help them. It's a free quiz, and it's
Okay.
called What is Your Starting Over Style? And
Oh,
so you answer 10 questions. It takes a couple of minutes. And then at the end, it tells you what your starting over style is and gives you some action steps based on what your style is for how you can move forward in your life.
that is wonderful. That is so cool. What a cool resource. Yeah. Okay. We'll definitely connect people with that too. There's a fly flying around. Okay. Sorry. It's just all of a sudden like zooming around my head. I'm going to pray for us before we close out.
Mhm,
But,
mhm.
anyways, okay, I'm gonna pray. Father, thank you so much for this time together. God, you have shown up in such a beautiful way today. And I'm so thankful for my friend Dawn. And I just pray you would continue to use her story, her testimony, and Lord, just to draw people near to you, that much would be made of you through Dawn. And Lord, I just pray for all my listeners and no matter when they're hearing this, whether when it comes out or 20 years from now, Lord, I lay before you each person as they are walking out this invitation that you give each of us to keep living. And so, Lord, we love you. We continue to give these days that you give us over to you, that we would honor you with them. It's in your name, Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
All right, friends, I think that about does it for us today. I would encourage you to pick up a book. I would encourage you to pick up a copy of this book. And if not for yourself, somebody else. And if you have somebody that is walking through this kind of a season, that they are having to figure out how to live life when everything has fallen apart, when their world has ended, pick up a copy for them or for you, and certainly share this episode with anybody that needs to hear it. So, thank you for being here, everyone, and good Lord willing, I will see you all next week. Bye.